afternoon, friends, and thank you very much for being here for our interaction on a weekly basis. I have, I think, 3 or 4 announcements to make, following which I will be ready to respond to questions that you may have on those issues or on anything else. So let me begin with the announcements that I have to make. The first is the forthcoming visit of the President of Singapore. President Tony Tan Keng Yam of Singapore will be on a state visit to India from the 8th to the 11th of February. The visit is part of the 50th anniversary commemoration activities that India and Singapore are undertaking this year. You are aware that during the course of the year, we've had several high-level meetings, and the celebration started off last year in August when the External Affairs Minister, Srimati Sushma Swaraj, visited Singapore. Since then, we've had chief ministers of several Indian states visit Singapore. By my recollection, the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, the Chief Minister of Telangana, the Chief Minister of West Bengal, and the Chief Minister of Rajasthan. In addition, the Urban Development Minister also from India visited Singapore. From the Singapore side, the Foreign Minister of Singapore, the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, the Defence Minister of Singapore, and the Emeritus Senior Minister of Singapore have visited India, all paving the way for what is an important event between India and Singapore. The last time that a head of state from Singapore visited India was in 2003, when President Nathan of Singapore visited India. From our side, we've had presidential visits by President V.V. Giri in September 1971, President K.R. Narayanan in November 2000, and President Kalam in February 2006. So this visit comes after 9 years since the last presidential interaction between the two countries. You are also aware that Singapore is our largest trade and investment partner in the ASEAN. It is the second largest source of foreign investment into India. It accounts for approximately a little above 12% of total FDI in India during the period from 2000 onwards. It is also India's top destination in terms of overseas investments. Approximately 33 plus billion is what Indian companies have invested there. There are about 6,000 Indian companies who are registered in Singapore. You are aware that during the discussions that our leadership has had with Singapore, we've focused on 2 or 3 major elements in our interaction. One is utilizing Singapore's skills in terms of skill development in India. Singapore is setting up an institute in Delhi, and we are working with the Singapore government to have a similar effort in the northeast of India. Another area of interest between India and Singapore has been smart cities. There have been several efforts by various chief ministers from India working with the Singapore government on urban development related matters, including smart cities. So these would be the major focus of our interactions with Singapore. We look forward to the visit of the President of Singapore to India, and it is our hope that this visit will lead to further strengthening of our bilateral relations, our economic interactions, and our cooperation with Singapore in terms of our regional and international cooperation in international organizations and regional organizations. I have another announcement to make, and that is the state visit of President Maithripala Sirisena of Sri Lanka to India from the 15th to the 18th of February. Those of you who have been following the matter are aware that President Sirisena had a talk with Prime Minister and had indicated his desire to undertake an early visit to India. This is his first visit outside Sri Lanka. You are also aware that the path to this visit was paved during discussions between the External Affairs Minister, Srimati Sushma Swaraj, and her Sri Lankan counterpart, Mr. Mangala Samarveera, when he visited Delhi as his first outside destination in January, on 18 January last month. In accordance with usual practice for such state visits, he will be given a ceremonial welcome in Rashtrapati Bhavan, have meetings with our leadership, and Rashtrapati ji will host a presidential banquet. It is also expected that after the official discussions on the 16th, President Sirisena will undertake visits to places of religious importance outside New Delhi. As a close and friendly neighbor, India looks forward to engage closely with President Sirisena across the spectrum of issues, and we hope this will strengthen our warm and friendly ties with Sri Lanka. I have a couple of other announcements also to make, and that is the third announcement that I have to make is about that the 10th World Hindi Conference will be held in Bhopal from the 10th to the 12th of September 2015. Those of you who follow this matter are aware that the first World Hindi Conference was held in Nagpur in 1975. Since then, we've had 9 other conferences. The last one was held in Johannesburg in 2012. And the 10th, it was then decided the next Hindi conference will be held in India. And we've just decided that this conference will be held in Bhopal between September 10th and 12th this year. The last announcement that I have to make is one which is of good news, and that is there were 11 Indian nurses who were in the zone of conflict in Kirkuk. They have been evacuated from there successfully. They are now safe in Erbil. Our officials there are taking care of them and making arrangements for their return, providing them documents, etc. And they will be returning to Kerala at the earliest once those formalities are completed. They all hail from Kerala. The External Affairs Minister, Srimati Sushma Swaraj, has today also informed the Kerala Chief Minister that we have been successful in bringing out these 11 Indian nurses who were in Kirkuk. I think I will stop at that, and if you have any questions on any of these topics or on anything else, I'll be ready to answer. Yes, ma'am, Rashmi. Just 1 minute. Let the microphone.
Just a clarification, you told us about the Indian companies who have invested in Singapore, and the figure you gave was 33 billion. US dollars or Sing dollars?
No, US dollars, 33.8 billion US dollars.
Thank you.
Yes, Lahiri.
Sir, when the chief ministers had a discussion in Singapore, so will there be any follow-up of those discussion or resolution of any of the issues like smart cities or investment, whether there's any kind of follow-up kind of thing here?
Smart cities is a concept that are being discussed between the concerned state governments and the Singapore government, because this requires detailed information from the state governments. while the central government is assisting them. At this stage, my understanding is Singapore is working with the Andhra Pradesh government on this. How far that work has progressed, we will only know once we have a clearer idea of where the Andhra Pradesh state government wants to go on this. My understanding is that it is a work in progress. It is still some way down before we move into concrete steps on that matter. Anyone on these issues? Yes, ma'am.
But can we get an idea of the religious places Sri Lankan president would be visiting?
My understanding is that he will go to Bodh Gaya and perhaps Tirupati. Yes, sir.
My question is regarding Indo-US nuclear deal.
We will deal with that later. Don't worry. It's not going anywhere. But let's finish issues relating to what we have at hand right now. And if there are none, then we will move to other things. Anyone else on any of the issues that I've raised? Yes, sir.
There were reports that India has denied visa to two archbishops from Vatican. Do you have any details on that?
Visa policy is not the province of the Ministry of External Affairs. You would love to think that it is, but we are not as powerful as you make us out to be. We are a small ministry dealing with niche issues relating to foreign relations, and therefore matters relating to diplomats and their visas come under our jurisdiction, but other issues of visa are handled elsewhere. Yes, ma'am. No, wait. Let's finish all relating to this, and then there are several people who are ready to raise their hands on other issues. No, not you. I never allow more than one, as you're aware. Shinjo, on these issues, I would be surprised. Yes, I know that. I thought you were ready to surprise us as well. Okay. If there are no questions on the four issues that I've mentioned, on the issues that I mentioned? Yes, please. Sridhar? Just wait on.
So what are the focus areas for talks between the two leaders, sir? The Sri Lankan president and the Indian PM?
India and Sri Lanka are close neighbors. So we share, when our two leaders meet, they discuss all issues of bilateral interest, all issues that we would like to share our views on, and those are the perennials in terms of our bilateral relations. There will be economic matters, there will be matters regarding to peace and reconciliation in Sri Lanka, there will be matters relating to people-to-people contact, and there will be, of course, matters relating to international issues that are likely to figure on the agenda of international organizations and which will be of interest to both of us. Yes. If there are no issues on these, then on this, yes, sir.
Regarding the 11 Indian nurses rescued, can you give a brief on how the rescue or whatever happened?
I don't think you should deride it as whatever. This certainly is. Look, this is a conflict zone. You are aware only. I'm certain none of you bothered about that there are Indian nationals in that conflict zone, because after a certain time you forgot asking about what happened to others who are in that conflict zone. There are several small little groups we had mentioned even previously who are left over in the conflict zone. At this stage you will appreciate that I cannot share details of how we were able to help them come out of a difficult situation. Obviously, staying in a conflict zone over a prolonged period is a difficult exercise. They've done so. Initially, we had requested them to leave. For reasons of their own, they decided otherwise. However, they are Indian nationals and we are duty bound to help them, even if at a certain stage they did not heed our advice to leave. At a later stage, when they did heed our when they decided that it was too difficult for them to continue, we worked out mechanisms whereby they could move quietly out of the conflict zone to an area where it is no longer a conflict area. And therefore, now they are now in Erbil, which is outside the conflict zone, and we were able to assist them quietly. You will appreciate that at this stage we will not be able to share more information because there are other Indian nationals in that conflict zone, and anything that we say will adversely impact possibly on those Indian nationals. So all I can tell you is, while you may forget them, the government of India doesn't forget Indian nationals in conflict zones. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. On this? Yeah.
So with the rescue of the 11 nurses, are there any other Indians left besides the 40 Indians in Mosul? Are there other Indians who are still in conflict zone in Iraq?
I started with some numbers at the beginning. We reached approximately 80 when you lost interest. If you go back to those numbers, tabulate them with 80 plus 39 who remain in a situation which remains unclear, and add the 11, you will get to it. A little bit of homework for journalists is good. Yes, if there are no questions on those elements, I'll open the floor for any other questions, and I know that there were several others. Yes, sir. Manish.
सर, पाकिस्तान की मीडिया में आज ये खबरें काफ़ी आई है कि भारत और पाकिस्तान के बीच मार्च में बातचीत शुरू हो सकती है. अगर कोई अपडेट हो जो आप हमसे शेयर करना चाहें.
मुझे तो ऐसा कोई नहीं पता है जो आप कह रहे हैं, ये पहली बार मैं सुन रहा हूँ. Yes, Nidhi?
Akbar, we're still waiting for the FAQs on the nuclear deal issue, but one of the big concerns that many who watch this deal closely have raised is whether the American suppliers will now not be liable at all if there is an accident. Is that the case, that it would only be the operators who are liable?
Let me assure you that when we arrived at an understanding with the US, we did so within the four corners of our law, international practice, and our own bilateral agreements that we have agreed to. So please don't jump to conclusions, because you will obviously be wrong in making that sort of a speculation. We will indeed be providing you that information, and that will be copious in nature. It will answer all your questions. So I would suggest that just hold on, because these are matters which need to be legally checked, etc., and we will make it public. Just I beg your indulgence to be a little patient. All your questions will be answered, and I can assure you that nothing that is there will make you question whether our laws have been fully complied with. And the question of operators not only being liable is not correct, because internationally, if you have a look at international best practices in terms of how liability risk management is done, in fact the impact on the operators is very small. So don't jump to these conclusions. You will have answers for this, detailed answers for this, but it certainly, for a short answer to that is, the question doesn't arise that operators will bear the brunt of the cost, because that's not what international best practice is, and that's not what India will follow. Yes. Ranjit?
Yes. Can you clarify India's stand on Vienna Convention on CSC?
There is nothing to clarify. As far as I know, India has signed it and is committed to ratify it.
When did India sign?
I do not have the exact date, but it is available in the public domain. But we have said we have already signed it. We are intent on ratifying it. And when it is going to be ratified, we don't tell that to you in advance. It's going to be ratified. Once we sign it, there is a commitment logically flowing from that it will be ratified. Yes, ma'am.
Natalie Pearson from Bloomberg News. 2 questions. The French foreign minister is in town.
Always one question. French foreign minister.
Sorry.
Choose.
The French foreign minister. So he's in town. This nuclear breakthrough that was achieved with the U.S., is that something that could be expanded as well to other suppliers, such as French suppliers? Has that been discussed during his visit here?
Yes, the French foreign minister is in town. Even as we speak, he is meeting Prime Minister. He had meetings earlier today with the External Affairs Minister. We discussed a whole France and India strategic partners. Our partnership is based on close tie-ups in defense, in space, in science and technology, and in nuclear. And therefore, it is normal for us to exchange views on how we are proceeding down the line in terms of our nuclear engagement globally. As far as France is concerned, it is normal for us to keep them informed about how we are proceeding. That said, we did not discuss the details of our engagement with the U.S. in very granular form, but we did indicate to them that we are now intent on moving ahead. All the policy hurdles that were there in terms of our engagement with the U.S. are over. We now see these as implementation issues, which we are committed to fulfill. As regards France, each country, let me tell you, has a unique way of addressing these things. The French are already in civil nuclear cooperation with us. They already supply us with nuclear fuel, etc., for several of our reactors. So the template for our engagement with them is already set. Yes. Mr. Venkat Narayan?
This is about the African Union Summit, which concluded on the 31st of January in Addis Ababa. I want to know the level of Indian participation, whether there was any participation at all, or was it at ministerial or official level, whether any talks between the Indian delegation and the attending partners in the summit took place as regards Africa's stance on the UN Security Council expansion. Thanks.
Yes, there was Indian participation in that. Secretary West, Mr. Navtej Sarna, was the Indian delegate who was participating there. Obviously, working with our African partners in terms of Security Council reform is an important issue that we engage with them in. We have engaged with various delegations on this. We've also engaged with them in terms of trying to assess their attitude towards when we should next have the India-Africa summit. As you are aware that last year it couldn't be held, so we've got an idea of what their interests and views are, and we hope to act on this in the not too distant future. Yes, ma'am. Naz.
The U.S. ambassador today met the foreign secretary. Was there any particular context of this?
If diplomats don't meet other diplomats, what will they do? We'll be out of work. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Luis from Spanish News Agency. After this week visit of the minister to China, what will be the next step? Are both India and China preparing new agreements in trade, in borders, ahead the visit of Mr. Modi in May? Thank you.
Yes, this was the External Affairs Minister's first visit to Beijing as External Affairs Minister, so it was a high-level visit. It sets the tone for our agenda of engagement with China during the course of this year. The External Affairs Minister went with a positive agenda of engagement. And they have agreed to a series of steps that both India and China are going to take during the course of the year to take the relationship forward. These, of course, relate to trade, but they also relate to other issues. It's a well-known fact that while China is our largest trade partner, there are issues relating to the trade deficit. So how do we try and address those during the course of the year? We are also aware that there is a perennial issue between India and China, that is the boundary question. They've agreed that the special representatives who are tasked with this important function will be meeting perhaps in a month's time from now, or less than a month's time from now. Also, when President Xi had visited India, he had invited Prime Minister Modi to visit China. That invitation has been accepted. We are working through diplomatic channels to decide on what is a mutually convenient date. I will not get into the date because it's not yet decided. However, it is the intention of our Prime Minister to visit China during his first year in office. Yes, sir. Ashok.
Akbar, can you tell us some details of progress and hurdles before India in development of the Chabahar port and the road and rail link up to Afghanistan?
You know, the Chabahar port for India is the entrepot for our engagement with Central Asia. And therefore, we attached importance to its development. Now, India is only a small player in this working with Iran on Chabahar port. The port itself will require other infrastructure. It will require other networks from the port on further. So at this stage, we are engaged with Iran on this because port is one aspect. There are other aspects where we are not directly engaged, but it's the Iranian government which has to do a whole set of other things. So we will work with the Iranian government and synchronize our actions in relation to what is happening elsewhere. Because for us, connectivity with Afghanistan is important, connectivity with Central Asia is important, and routing our goods through Chabahar is an important entrepot. But don't see this in isolation of you can't have a port without other infrastructure there. So this has to work in synchronization, and we are working with Iran on these aspects of how we can synchronize our efforts and their efforts. Yes, Shinjai?
So the JUD, which is a banned organization, is having Kashmir solidarity rallies today in Islamabad, right next to the ISI headquarters. So can you tell us how this government views it and what it wishes to do about it?
You know, we are aware that there are multiplicity of activities that are being undertaken today in Pakistan by their leaders and by unsavory elements who are wanted elsewhere. Now, our view is that Pakistan's self-destructive and futile quest for territorial aggrandizement in Jammu and Kashmir is well known to us. Let me repeat for you that the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir is and will always remain an integral part of the Indian Union. It is therefore high time for Pakistan to start paying attention to all the problems that afflict them rather than covet what is not theirs and never will be. Yes, sir.
Sir, Obama visit ended on 27th of January, but after effects of his speech in CD Fort are still being discussed. How did India perceive his suggestion of religious tolerance, and do you think India need any lesson on it?
I would draw your attention to what the clarification of the White House on this is. This is available on their website now. I would suggest you have a look at this and what their interpretation of that is, that what you seem to think is not what that they seem to be thinking about it. So may I suggest it's available in the public domain, or the White House National Security Council Director has issued a clarification saying that you may have got it wrong. That was always our view. Yes.
Akbar, for more than a month now, neighboring Bangladesh is going through almost unprecedented political unrest and violence. Do you have any comment to make on this situation over there?
You are aware that it is not our policy to intervene in matters which are essentially in the domestic jurisdiction of any of our neighbors or elsewhere. That said, it has always been our view that it is for the people and government of Bangladesh to resolve issues themselves. All we do is we wish Bangladesh, its government and people all the very best and hope that they resolve their issues themselves. It is not for the government of India to make any judgment call on that. Anyone else? On anything else? If not, yes. Oh no, ma'am, you already asked once. On something else? Okay.
Akbar, would you like to tell us something about the head of the missions conference that is starting from 7th?
Yeah. Well, there are big banners available which indicate that the conference principal theme is diplomacy for development. It is different from previous conferences because the focus is on what diplomacy can do for India. Usually our focus had been how international issues are shaping up and how the impact on India and what India can do internationally. The focus this time is what diplomacy can bring to bear on India's development. So what we are having is different from previous years in terms of the theme. Also, we've expanded the number of days. It is now from the 7th to the 10th. It will be inaugurated by the Prime Minister on the 7th. However, one day prior to that will also be internal consultations. Those internal consultations will focus on a lot of what are issues of internal in nature. However, the External Affairs Minister herself will be presiding on those. You are aware that there have been several new efforts made to receive feedback. You are aware that the Prime Minister himself has requested for inputs on the functioning of embassies in terms of how people perceive them. These inputs will be taken on board and there will be a detailed session on what missions are doing to respond to the perceptions that these inputs are providing, number one. So there is a new element in terms of responses to beyond what was left to in the room. Either it was previously we would respond to what some of our colleagues raised or what guest speakers raised. This time we've got beyond that and we are receiving views from outside. This is number one. Number two, another prospect which we had started last year is the role of states and cooperation with the Ministry of External Affairs on issues relating to which states may have. So we are bringing in a new stakeholder in terms of assistance to the Ministry of External Affairs as well as to assist our nationals outside, because the states play an important role in this. Like I said to you today, when the 11 nurses were helped and brought to safety, the External Affairs Minister immediately contacted the Chief Minister of Kerala. So engagement of states is an important matter on the agenda of the Ministry of External Affairs, and that also will be addressed. In addition to these, we will certainly have the perennials of Indian foreign policy there, and you are all aware of what they are. I don't want to get into those details. Yes, sir.
सर, विदेश मंत्री अभी हाल ही में चीन से लौटी हैं। कैलाश मानसरोवर की यात्रा को लेकर के कुछ पेपर्स का एक्सचेंज हुआ है वहां से, थोड़ा इसके बारे में एलैबोरेट करेंगे हमें कि क्या हुआ है और कब से ये यात्रा शुरू हो पाएगी?
Yes, you are aware that when Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping met last, they agreed to open an additional route for Indian pilgrims to travel for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. So this is an additional route. The old route remains. However, the advantages of this new route is it is motorable, it reduces the travel time, and it could be useful for those who are not physically able to perform the route through the old, to use the old route, which involves a lot of trekking, etc. Now, that was an agreement that was agreed upon by President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi. What has happened now during the visit of the External Affairs Minister, we've decided that it will be actualized from this year. So, we hope that from this year, this route will start functioning. In the first year, there will be 5 groups of pilgrims who will go through this, 50 each. So, a total of 250, because this is the first year, it's like a trial run. It will help in understanding what are the major issues that pilgrims may face, etc. So 250 additional pilgrims, apart from the 900 or 1,000 who undertake through the other route, 250 additional pilgrims will undertake the yatra through this route. What we will do is we will be making that announcement of who would like to go through this route in addition to that route shortly. Once that announcement is made, people can opt for whichever route they want. And my understanding is that the first group of pilgrims will be in the latter half of June. And then at regular intervals, those 5 groups will go. There is a gap between the first and the second and the third, as is done on the other side also. That's what we've agreed on. This is a major breakthrough, and it is also action-oriented in the sense that it was agreed less than 6 months ago. We've acted on it, and it's being implemented within 1 year of agreement. If all of you would now permit me, thank you very much, and have a nice evening.